Hi everyone, my name is Tessa from Brightsparks Tutors, and today we're going to be taking you through some study tips to use both before your exams and during your exams. 2020 has been such a weird year with so many interruptions to all of our routines, and that is absolutely true for the students who are currently trying to finish their academic years. And right now, that makes study skills even more important than they have been in the past, because you need to make sure that you are utilizing the time that you have left as best as you can. So today I have Erica with me, and Erica is a former Brightsparks Tutors staff member and a former Brightsparks tutor. She's currently teaching in Japan, and she also has more than 8 years teaching experience for a whole variety of subjects. So she knows what she's talking about when it comes to study skills. Hi, Erica.
Hi, Tessa. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for being here. It's great to have you join us today.
Yeah, it's nice seeing you guys, and all the way from Japan. It's a very interesting time of our lives right now.
It absolutely is. And I think particularly for the learners across the globe, I mean, we're obviously in a South African context talking about the South African students. It's a really challenging time for them.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so just to start us off, can you explain a bit more to us about how memory works?
So memory happens in 3 stages. So we start by encoding information. So that's basically the time when you receive information. So either you're in a class and you're hearing something, or you're talking to your friends and you receive some information. It's like the first time you have the information. But you can also during this time be like really focused on something, and it's just like inputting into your brain. So storage is the time where that information becomes embedded in your brain. So you start remembering it, and it starts like being like, just think about it as like a little bucket, and it just keeps getting filled, and it just stays there. It has a little home in your house, in your brain. And retrieval is when we go to the bucket and we want to get some of the information out of it. So this is your short-term memory and your long-term memory. So you have encoded, you have put the information in, you have put it in its place where it belongs, and now retrieval is when you go and find that information to use it for something else. So that's just like a very brief, description of how memory works.
Okay, fantastic. And obviously different study methods and different study tips will influence how we are storing and retrieving that information, encoding, storing and retrieving rather. And in that kind of vein, does everyone's brain work in the same way? Does everyone study in the same way?
No, definitely not. So there are many different types of study styles that work for people. So you get visual learners, audio learners, and kinesthetic, kind of like touchy learners. So visual learners, the most effective way for them to encode information involves anything like pictures, graphs, using lots of colors when they make summaries and things like that. Audio learners are obviously more, inclined to the hearing or listening skills. So they can learn by listening to educational songs, or, making their own up if they wanted to, and like repeating to themselves. Like when you're studying things, you hear your own voice. That's a very effective way for them to encode the information into their brain. And then kinetic learners are ones that are more physical, like they need to be involved in the information. So even just the act of physically writing out your notes can be considered kinesthetic, because when your hand or your body is involved, it's for those learners, there's a stronger connection to their brain, and it helps them to encode the information better. So it's very important that you identify what kind of style works for you, so as to optimize what time you do have. And we know that at the moment, everybody's very pressured for time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I know that with younger learners in particular, most of them are the kinesthetic type of learners. So, I mean, the little kids, they need to learn while moving generally. Whereas as we get older, we can morph into one of the different kinds, or even multiple ones. We can be visual, auditory learners, for example.
Yeah. And it's also, as we grow older, our attention span is a little bit longer. So we don't need our bodies to get involved to make up for the space so much. But it does not make it any less valid as a way of learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I know many adults who are still kinesthetic learners at this stage.
Yeah, I can't study without writing out my work whatsoever.
Okay, cool. So then basing our information on those learning styles, what are your top study tips? Let's go first into when a learner is preparing for an exam. So when they're actually sitting down and they are trying to encode that information, what should they be doing?
Well, I think before anything, the most important thing for everyone is that they give themselves enough time to study. So don't, like, cramming is the absolute worst way to put information into your brain. It goes straight into your short-term memory, and it's a very unreliable way to access information. And the extra pressure it puts on learners is not a very memory-friendly environment. So firstly, just make sure you don't cram. Give yourself as much time as you can for every exam. But other than that, so I do encourage people to use as many of your senses as you can when you're studying or learning anything. So especially for like audio or visual learners, it's very important, like if you use colors, if you make summaries that really work for you, make sure that you have identified this and tried out different styles. Hopefully by matric, you have explored a little bit. Maybe you like brain charts, mind maps, maybe you like diagrams, maybe you just like it all written out and you say it to yourself over and over again. On that vein, in October 2017, the University of Waterloo published a paper that said that the act of hearing yourself, like speaking out loud, repeating your work to you, has proven to be a very successful way of encoding information for many people. Doesn't matter what your learning style is. So nice little tip, that. But I think it's very valuable as a study tool is doing all the exam papers. And there's a number of reasons for that. So firstly, questions are repeated. Like in mathematics, sometimes you'll see the same questions over and over again, but they'll change the numbers. And it also gives you a sense of familiarity with the paper. So if you do enough of them, you understand how the paper is put together. So when you write the exam, you don't get any nasty surprises. And panic is the thing that makes us forget very quickly. So I think it's very important to practice all the exam papers, and it also helps you to identify the areas that need a little bit more work. Then if you can, I know this is a very horrible time, but if you can find somebody to explain it to, it is a very good way to study. So even if you have to do it on Zoom, or if you have to, wear masks and sit 2 meters apart from each other, when you teach somebody else, you have to think about the work, and you have to engage within your brain in an effective enough way to explain it to somebody else. So that is a very good way to study. And then the last one is my last tip is a bit more of like a wholesome mental health one, is to make sure that you take lots of breaks and you exercise. So exercise not only gives you the energy to continue studying, because we are obviously putting in a lot of effort at this point, but also allows your brain to focus. So that physical break where you're outside of your brain and you're inside of your body allows your brain more space to focus when you are actually studying, so that the time you spend studying, you can get more information in than what you would have if you just studied for 8 hours straight. So take lots of breaks, have lots of water, and exercise is really, really good for this studying and for doing your best.
Okay, cool. And tell me, how often should we be taking those breaks?
So I would say within an hour, at least take like 10 minutes to, you don't have to go run a block, but just take 10 minutes, walk once around your house or anything, just to firstly, it's really good for your body to not sit for such a long time. But it's also just getting some fresh air and just remembering that, the whole world isn't this exam and that you're going to be okay. So I'd say at least 10 minutes for every hour. If you do like studying for longer periods, just make your break a little bit longer. So let's say 30 minutes every 3 hours, depending on your particular style and your attention span.
Okay, fantastic. And then, you've mentioned briefly making sure that we don't panic and making sure that we're in a good mental space. We know this exam isn't the end of the world, but often when you're actually sitting in an exam and you maybe see, yeah, exactly. It feels like it's the end of the world, or it feels like this is the most important thing in the world. You maybe see a question that you don't know the answer to immediately and you just totally freeze. So how should learners be dealing with that?
So I have a couple of things which blends a little bit into like study tips for during an exam, writing tips, I guess, would be, so for instance, I always encourage students to write the exam in any order they see fit. You are allowed to do question 1, then question 5, then question 2. But just make sure you don't do 2.1 and then 4.4. Okay, do the whole of question 2 and the whole of question 4 at a time. The reason I say that is that if you start with the information that like, I know this part of maths so good, when you finish that question, you have this little ego boost where you're like, yeah, I can make it through this exam, which gives your brain just like a little bit of rest, because before the exam, we're always very anxious because we have no idea what to expect. So during your reading time, when you're reading through your exam, decide what you feel you can do the best at. And the things you don't know, don't beat yourself up. So like if there's a question like 5.2, 3.2 that you have no idea what it's about, just leave enough space for the question. Don't worry about it. Go on to the next one and do your best until you get to the end of the exam. If there's any time left, go back to them. And that just that culture in your mind of not panicking about questions or not being hard on yourself if you don't know something will go a long way to making sure that you don't stress and you don't forget things because you're stressing. And then if you do feel the stress coming on when you're writing, it is a very powerful thing to breathe. Okay, just 3 very deep breaths and take it all the way down into your tummy will do a great job at calming you down. And there are obviously things you can do beforehand. So make sure that you pack your bags the night before, because that's one less decision or one less choice your brain has to make in the morning. And you don't have to go, oh, did I bring an extra pen? Does this one write? Does this one have ink in it? Is it sharp? Do I have my, yes. So if you do that the night before, you have one less thing to worry about. The same with sleep. Like, our brains do not function properly without sleep. And if you don't sleep enough, if you cram until 4 in the morning and then go write your exam at 8, I promise you, you are going to struggle. So just have some sleep, make sure that you are ready long before. Again, this is about giving yourself as much time as you can to prepare. And then since we're talking about the during the exam tips, I would also say don't leave blank spaces. So after, if you've gone through it and you just have no idea what it is, don't leave it blank. You make something up, because there's 2 reasons for this. Is 90% of the time we leave the blank spaces because we're doubting ourselves. Because you see this question, you're like, I'm not sure if that is the right answer. But the way our brains work is that we are trained, our brains are like wired to do instant recall. So like you see the question, something in your brain goes, I know that. And then we're like, I'm not sure. Not most of the time, that first instinct is correct. And I'm sure you'll have seen it yourself when you have crossed out an answer and the teacher said it was right. It's not foolproof. It's not 100% of the time, but it is a nice, it's developing that trust in your brain will help you with your exams.
And that's definitely true for like true false questions or multiple choice questions.
Oh my gosh,
because
yes.
You've got like a 50% chance of getting it right or a 25% chance. Whereas if you leave it blank, you have a 0% chance of getting it right.
Exactly. And the other thing is, quite sometimes, like if the teacher or the examinator made a mistake in the exam, If you wrote nothing, you get nothing. But if you tried something, and I'm not saying you wrote a love letter to your teacher, I'm saying if you tried to make a real answer, okay, then you will get those marks. If the mistake was on the teacher, they will sometimes give you the marks. Well, they'll give everybody the marks who tried. But if you just left it blank, you'll get a 0.
That's
because
pretty
you obviously
interesting.
had no idea.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I'm not sure if it's true for all the matric exams, but definitely for some of the end-year exams or tests, they either take it out of the exam, so they make the exam count out of less, or they'll give you the marks just to like even it out for everyone. And check the time allocation. So firstly, read the question 2 or 3 times. If you have to highlight the keywords, do so, because sometimes teachers or examinators will sneak 2 questions into one. They'll have like some question and then say, and explain why this. So make sure that you know exactly how many things they want you to answer, and you can check your time, your mark allocation for that as well. Mark allocation literally says, this is how many facts or how many points or how many steps I need. And that is also congruent to the time allocated. So if a maths paper is 150 marks, try to hit 1 minute, 1 mark, and you'll have enough time to review it afterwards as well. So just check, like the questions that have the longest time, biggest marks need more time, more effort into them. So just use that as a way to guide your working out. If you're taking too long with a sum or a question, just stop where you are, leave a little space. If you don't know anything further, go on to the next one, and you can come back and put out all of your ideas. I think that's all of my ideas.
Okay, fantastic. I mean, I think that last one is particularly important. We always hear teachers telling us, look at the mark allocation, because that is how you need to frame your answer. You need to put in 3 points for a 3-mark question. But then to also have that idea that if it's a 3-mark question and you have a 150-mark paper, then you shouldn't be spending a huge amount of time on it. You should be spending a couple of minutes on it. If it's taking you 10 minutes, then you really need to be moving on to the next question.
Yeah, so look at the questions, the ones that are like 20 marks. Those are the ones that are more deserving of your time than a little itty bitty question.
And need 20 facts.
Yes. So for instance, like a summary in English is always 10 marks, of which they'll tell you in the question, again, read your questions very carefully, is 7 points. So they want 7 facts, which is 7 sentences. Don't write 8, 9, 10, 11 sentences. 7 sentences and 3 for like grammar and, things like that. So just make sure that you know exactly what is expected of you. Don't spend more time than you need to, and don't leave blank questions.
Yeah, and I think going through the past papers is also something that helps with that, because if you're looking at a past paper in the memo, you see exactly where those marks are allocated.
Yeah, and you also know like the way they are expecting you to phrase things. And past papers, especially with now in the time where lots of people have a bunch of like a big, what is the word? Unequal learning at the moment. There's a lot of inequality in the information that we have, because we've all had different levels of teaching this year. Because of that, if you have the memo and you don't you didn't have a lesson about this topic, you can reverse engineer it to get the information you need. So if you don't know this like you don't understand the cell structure of this thing in biology, if you can find a past paper which asks questions about that, you will learn about it, and you'll learn how they expect the marks, because you wouldn't have heard your teacher explain to you how many marks or how the marks are allocated. So you can check the memo. It's a very helpful way of learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell me, what do you feel about learners leaving an exam or a test venue early? Is that something that they should do, or should they sit there and try to figure it out until the last minute?
I really think this depends on the person. So if you are like, I had friends who would stay until the last minute and they would stress themselves to death, and then afterwards they would tell me they scratched out questions like 7 times. And as a teacher, I've seen this, children doubting themselves, and then it'll be like, they'll say like the answer's 10, then it'll change to 50, and then it'll change to 10 again, and then it'll change to like 35. And the first one was right. But because they had all this time to worry about it, they doubted themselves and they changed the answer and they got it wrong in the end. So it depends on what kind of person you are. Like if you're a person who has like trained your brain very well to just like, these are the facts, we're going to get them out, we're going to write it, and you are a person who writes very fast, you are going to take less time. But make sure that, irrelevant as to which kind of person you are, whether you need to go over it and over it again, make sure you at least read through every single question and answer once before you leave the venue. If you have any extra time, use it. But if you are confident in what you said and you put in a lot of effort and studying into it, and you've already checked your answers once or twice, I do not see any, in my opinion, I don't see any reason to stay there and then get all anxious about the exam. So it's really about knowing yourself as a learner.
Yeah. And I suppose if you are the type of person who's left gaps in the questions, then that extra time can really be a time to fill those gaps, even if you are just guessing, as we were speaking about.
Yeah, I was always much happier when my students would give me, even if it's a bunch of nonsense, if they did their best and they gave me some answer which I can see comes from their learning. Sometimes I could go and find marks for them in it, even if it felt like they were ranting. I could go and find marks for them. So it's always better. Like if you don't know something, rather write too much. If you have enough time, write too much rather than too little.
Awesome. And then finally, COVID's impact on education is obviously really big on everyone's minds right now, both our learners and our parents, and obviously our teachers. So you've mentioned one tactic for this, but what should learners do about gaps in their knowledge or their understanding caused by interrupted schooling?
So first, I think it's important that we acknowledge that every situation is different. Because at this point, there's so much in terms of financial inequality and educational inequality that can affect the amount of knowledge you have received this year. For instance, if you don't have internet at home, there's no way you can have lessons online. So it really is, making the best of whatever situation you find yourself in. So if you are able to, I would recommend getting tutors for and focusing on the things that you haven't learned yet, or the things that you kind of know, but you are not sure. You never got to ask your teacher the questions. So if you can afford a tutor and you can find one, you can have lessons online, you can ask all of the lovely Brightsparks people.
Yes, you can.
Things. If you do have access to your teachers at all, you can ask them if they have any extra classes, either physically or again online, depending on what's happening in your environment. But unfortunately, I do feel like a lot of this is going to fall on the shoulders of the learners themselves. And it is not fair. It is not great. But unfortunately, this is where we are at, and we just need to make sure that we prepare ourselves as best as we can. So it will involve a lot of self-study. So if for anything you haven't learned, the internet is an amazing thing. You can find YouTube videos on just about anything. For maths and science, I'm not sure of science, but especially for maths, you can check Khan Academy. They have tutorials on just about every single subject or topic in the maths out there. I know that at university, lots of my friends were using it to do university lectures on, because of the things they didn't understand. So it's a very helpful thing. You can also, if you can, again, teach somebody. So teach your friends online, physically 2 meters away. See, you know, that is even if you like explain to yourself, if you remember when you were a child and you used to play like I'm the teacher, that is a very effective way of learning, because you are explaining things not only to your pretend friends, but you're really saying it to yourself as well. And then in your books, and I know you probably hate your books by now, but in your books, there are exercises. And if you go through the chapter, you make your notes, you highlight the important things, you summarize it, try the exercises afterwards. And if you can get the answers, you can ask your teacher maybe if they have the answers, or like find them online or something, or ask a friend who's much better in the subject. Just, you know, I think this is a time where it's really important to be creative and resourceful, where you have to
creative. Yeah, I love it.
Coined. If you have to be creative about the ways that you can find the information you need. So if you have access to the internet, use it. If you only have a cell phone, I promise you it'll be just as good. And you can also try to take information, because I'm sure at the moment it's feeling very overwhelming, but try and take that information and pack it into as small, you know, digestible chunks as you can. So if that means making pictures, drawing pictures for yourself to put a lot of information on a teeny tiny page, do it. Like, do whatever it takes for you to get the information in your brain, is my advice.
Fantastic. And then just kind of following up on that, you know, it's a massively stressful time for any learners who are writing tests and exams at the moment, not only because of the interrupted education, but because of the global pandemic that we're all going through. So that makes it difficult for learners to concentrate. How would you advise learners work through this?
Yeah, so again, I would just reiterate all the things I have mentioned to like make you stress less during the exam, but also preparing yourself. I think especially at this time for everyone, it's very important to take care of yourself first before everything else, before work, before school, before everything. You cannot, I'm sure we've all heard the expression, you can't fill from an empty cup. Yeah. You can't write an exam if you are dead tired, you haven't slept in days, you haven't eaten anything. Just do your best to take care of yourself first. Make sure you get your sleep, drink lots of water, still exercise. It's amazing for the brain. I know that everybody's like, exercise is good for your body, but it is so beneficial when you're studying to just give yourself that break.
And for that stress level, because exercise actually allows you to oxygenate your body a lot better, which is going to help with the anxiety that students may be facing.
And we all love the happy hormones that comes with exercise.
Yes.
The endorphins are so good for you.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, I know we are in the middle of a pandemic, but having a sense of community and not feeling like you're not only physically isolated, but emotionally isolated is also a very big factor in our happiness. So make sure that, like, even if you and your friends can only text, try having a video chat rather, or try, you know, just seeing their face, or, you know, talk over the fence of your homes or whatever you can, just to like make sure that you're spending time with people who care about you, and that you are also taking care of your physical body. And I would also recommend that if you do have any hobbies, obviously you have to scale down on them to make space for the studying, but don't abandon them completely. If you enjoy drawing, find 10 minutes to do a little doodle on the corner of your page, just to give your brain that, you know, little hit of, I'm happy I'm doing something I love. Okay, if you really enjoy playing basketball and you have a hoop outside, just throw, you know, a couple of hoops. Just do something that makes you happy, that is not exams, and that is not, you know, sitting in your room alone in the dark.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think we've really covered a lot today in terms of how learners can be ensuring that they are studying effectively, that they understand how their brain works, and that they need to figure out what their learning styles are, as well as some tips for self-care to make sure that they're not overworked, to make sure that they're not too stressed out, and how to handle those emotions that inevitably come with an exam or a test situation.
Okay, so remember to breathe, do your best, and you've got this.
You do. And if you need any help, Brightsparks Tutors is always here. Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Good luck.